He knocked me over. I landed on the dog bowl.
This one's wife. Daniel dumped. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. Those of you who are familiar with my work know that the narcissist has something called a fuel matrix. This is a description for where people, seen as appliances, by the narcissist fit. Most narcissists will have an intimate partner primary source, who is the person they rely on the most for the provision of fuel, character traits, residual benefits, and is the easiest to control. Sometimes that intimate partner is non-intimate. There will then be a number of secondary sources, friends, colleagues, family, all non-intimate. Sometimes intimate partner secondary sources, an affair partner, for example, and tertiary sources, the general public, the person who serves you in a shop, a waiter or waitress, somebody that you perhaps buy a newspaper from every workday morning, but don't actually know. The constitution of the fuel matrix varies dependent upon the different type of narcissist, and if you want to understand more about that, then you would be well placed to read my book Pipelines, which talks about how those fuel matrices are constituted and also understanding changes to the narcissist fuel matrix. So you can understand, and it's very interesting, how those changes come about and the impact it has upon the narcissist. Now, some narcissists keep fairly constant fuel matrices, whereby they might swap the intimate partners every so often, but the secondary sources, family members, friends, colleagues, neighbours, largely stay the same. Some narcissists do a lot of swapping in and out of those secondary sources, whereby they may have different networks within that secondary level. So they might have, for instance, one group of friends who are from childhood, another group of friends who are from a particular workplace, another group of friends through a particular interest like going to football, another group of friends who might be linked to the current intimate partner. And the narcissist dips in and out of those networks as and when, taking the relevant non-intimate secondary sources off the shelf, interacting with them and putting them back on. Disengagement requires a trigger. And disengagement is most common with the intimate partner primary source, but it can be done with intimate partner secondary sources and non-intimate secondary sources. Clear examples of that in relation to this one's wife have been her father, her half-siblings, her childhood friend Inaki Priddy, for example, and other friends that have fallen by the wayside. This is because this one's wife has moved through different strata of operation, so that she started off in one position and then moved to one which she's deemed higher, and then moved to another that's deemed higher, and therefore those secondary sources are not just left on the shelf, but they're deemed surplus to requirements because they no longer provide a viable function for her, and thus she disengages from them. In some instances, the secondary sources are alternatively viewed as problematic, or it might be a combination of the two factors. They're seen as problematic and not serving any useful purpose. And we see another example of the way that this one's wife treats a secondary source and the collateral consequences thereafter. You'll be familiar with crime makeup man Daniel Martin. He's another of those secondary sources that is actually a paid lackey of this one's wife, who also happens to be described as a friend. This one's wife doesn't really make friends in the traditional sense, because as a narcissist, friends are only there to serve her purposes. And because she's generally unlikable and quite a boring individual, there's nothing about her that would compel many people to want to be friends with her naturally, unless either there's something in it for them by way of payment. For instance, that's why she would hang out with her hairdresser and her makeup person and her publicist. Or that they've got a vested interest in using this one's wife for themselves also, and thus those people hang out with her. They're not really interested in her as a person, and for good reason. After all, she's no sense of humour, she's no charisma, she's rather dull, and she's not particularly bright. And therefore, the only reason that many people would bother with her is because they are being paid by her, so they need to keep her good graces, or that they see that they can make some hay out of her, perhaps elevating their own position because of her level of fame, for example. This has been the case with Daniel Martin, who has always struck me as a rather self-serving, arse-licking individual, and hitherto has been quite a staunch defender of this one's wife, attacking YouTubers, for example, on X. Well, just recently, he found himself on the receiving end of Madam's disapproval, as he had to delete a video about this one's wife's makeup for the Balenciaga fashion show in Paris. The video was there, and then it vanished. And it is highly likely that this was a consequence of the instruction of this one's wife, that she found some form of offence in relation to the creation and broadcasting of this video. As we know, this one's wife has got a bit of history in respect of causing people to delete pictures of her. For example, there was a fan, Brianna Sanchez, who took down unfiltered pictures of her and this one's wife at a Navy SEAL Foundation event. Sanchez found herself under attack by this one's wife's crazy followers for showing this one's wife's awful complexion and chipped nail polish. This one's wife also in the past has demonstrated instances where she's compelled people to remove pictures because they weren't particularly flattering of her. There's also the recent brouhaha surrounding the removal of the pictures from the Instagram accounts of Kris Jenner and Kim Kardashian. Well, the removal of that video by Daniel Martin, clearly at the behest of this one's wife, has resulted in a problem for the crying makeup man. Not only has she failed to publicise him in recent weeks, but it also looks like Daniel has had something of a hissy fit, as he hasn't mentioned her on X, nor has he defended her for some time. And it would appear that as a consequence of his transgression of placing that video, he has been either left on the shelf or more likely disengaged from. The posting of the video threatened this one's wife's need for control. She sought to nullify that threat to control by issuing an instruction to Daniel to have it taken down. He duly complied, because of course he's an arse-licker when it comes to this one's wife. But thereafter, that action of his has caused him to be painted black, which has resulted in the fact that she has not had anything to do with him. Daniel evidently has not taken kindly to that, and, in a bit of a hissy fit and a sulk, has therefore stopped commenting about this one's wife on his X account, has not been defending her, and thus a collateral consequence of her painting him black and disengaging from him is that he has decided that he's not going to defend her any longer. Thus, once again, you see the way that the narcissist treats a supposed friend as entirely disposable. That's why we refer to them as appliances. You're not actually a friend. There's no sense of obligation within the relationship. You are there to be used for the purposes of the narcissist. You are there to be used for what you provide the narcissist in terms of fuel, character traits and residual benefits. And as Daniel Martin has found out, resulting in his dumping, is that if you are not a good little appliance that is compliant and behaving yourself, then you'll receive a corrective devaluation. And in Daniel's case, even though he complied with what this one's wife required, the removal of the video, it essentially had him on the naughty step. And thereafter, she's not bothered with him. And he, petulant creature that he is, has decided, well, I'm not going to bother with her either. And as a consequence of that continued failing of being painted black, it looks like Daniel has been disengaged from and joins the long list of appliances that have been used by this one's wife and cast to one side. Thus, he ends up in the dumpster. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.